Hey everybody, welcome to the Itch Network. Today we're doing our in-depth movie review series. This is the first of many, hopefully, on the classic movie The Thing. And of course, we're referencing 1982's The Thing, directed by John Carpenter. But we will be getting into the other things as well. That's funny, we can say the other things. Of course, today, my dear friend and movie expert, Ninja C. Ninja, how are you?
I'm back, baby, and I'm better than ever.
Excellent. We've got quite a monster in front of us, no pun intended. We have the history of The Thing. It starts way back in the early 1900s and goes probably a little further than it should, but we'll talk about all that and everything in between. This is where normally we talk about what the comments were on the last video, but of course this is the first one, so
hopefully
make
the
sure.
first one to a lot of series of this. Talking about maybe The Fly was one of them.
That was the other idea, but don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
Hey, I'm trying to get everybody involved. I'd like to see if people want to leave what they want to see moving forward.
That's a great idea. If you got a movie, I guess we're kind of in the horror genre.
Series of movies, because I know
you're killing
people
me.
love the. Hey, I'm sorry. Christmas is coming up. Die Hard series, man. People love it. It's a Christmas movie. Fight me on it. Change my mind.
Killing me. If there's a movie you'd like us to talk about, or I guess a history of movies, a series of movies, then by all means put it in the comments below, and we might do it if I feel like I have the time for it. But today we're talking about The Thing. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave all the comments you want below about how well we did, what you liked, what you didn't, and what movies you might want to hear about next. Ninja, what's your history with The Thing?
The Thing, I grew up watching it. It was on cable a lot, and I actually now own a 4-disc, like a set of John Carpenter movies, and that's on it. It's not a special edition. It's just a regular DVD copy of it. I'm a little biased. I really like John Carpenter's movies, and I think you do too.
Yeah.
I think it's one of his best ones because people say Halloween is, but I really don't like. And it's not a lot of special effects.
Mm-hmm.
And I love like sci-fi and horror is my sweet spot.
Sci-fi.
This just pushes all the buttons, man.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that. I like sci-fi, not necessarily like specifically horror, but enough sci-fi that I like the creepiness of it and I like the thoughtfulness of it. Sci-fi always presents kind of like a Star Trek or a Twilight Zone. It presents moral dilemmas that we don't currently face, but are astonishing to think about, and not only from a like this has never happened before perspective, but also it could happen perspective.
Yeah, I like that open-ended. There's an openness to it, I guess, if this could happen. And this movie is very open to interpretation, the ending and everything else, but I don't want to get too ahead of.
Yeah, that we'll definitely get into all that. But I want to talk about some of the history before the movie. Of course, for those who don't know, it's actually based off of a novella that was released in August of 1938. And it is by John W. Campbell Jr. under the pen name of Don A. Stewart.
Were they known for this this type of work, or?
It says it was first published. I'm going off of Wikipedia here. We did not read this. We've.
I've just started.
We ain't readers. We're watchers.
Show,
yeah. So I haven't read it. I'm just going off of what Wikipedia says. We have watched the other pieces that we're going to talk about, but this we have not read. It's from Astounding Science Fiction, and the plot is very familiar if you're familiar with The Thing. It's a group of scientific researchers isolated in Antarctica by the nearly ended winter. They discover an alien spaceship buried in ice where it crashed 20 million years before. They try to thaw the inside of the spacecraft with the thermite charge, but end up accidentally destroying it with the ship's magnesium hulls ignited by the charge. They do recover an alien pilot, yada, yada, yada. They realize... What's that?
I think it's more aligned with the 1982 version than the
exactly
black and white edition one, because I did do some research on that. So
yeah, and we'll talk about this is way more close to John Carpenter's The Thing. They realize it's been left to its own devices for a week, coming and going as it pleases, able to squeeze under doors by transforming itself. With the creatures inside the base destroyed, McCready and 2 others enter the cabin to kill the thing. Yada yada yada. Again, they kill it with a blowtorch. It definitely models. It is more towards the 1982 version. Man, I kind of want to read it. Despite,
is it on Kindle? Can we give them links and discount codes?
Let me check. Where can I read who goes there?
I'm looking it up right now, actually, to see if it is. But I think let's leave that to the audience. Maybe they'll find it, and we'll get bigger and give discount codes out and stuff. So.
It's on Goodreads.com. Who goes there?
So old, it might even be open like
Kindle store, $2.41.
Sounds like a bargain. That is, what is that, like a soda at a gas station?
Yeah, dude. That's not bad. I would check it out. How many pages is it? You know I don't like to read. Let me see how many pages. 161 pages on paperback. That is a swift read. You can read Who Goes There.
That is on your, if you have a commute to work, we're definitely not driving. I wouldn't do that. But, if you're on a bus or a train or something. I just want to go out there for safety purposes. We don't want to get sued.
Well, some time passed between that. So that came out in 1938. Yep. And a little bit of time passed, and then there became a big need for black and white horror films. Before we get into The Thing from Another World, what is your take on black and white horror films from the 1950s?
Black and white horror films. Well, I wasn't alive, so a little tough. Well, they kind of were a niche genre of a product of the time, so they're all kind of in some age better and worse than others.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know of The Thing from Another World. It is definitely a product of the time, but there's also another pretty well-known movie that came out around that time that's a black and white, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Because I own the DVD. I own like a collector's copy of that, which includes the original and the Keanu Reeves
classic
updated movie of it. And I have it's on DVD. It's transferred to DVD, and it actually still holds up.
Wow.
It being that old and stuff and everything, but it's I don't know. I think it was the birthplace of it's the timeline for horror in that time.
I think a lot of people are familiar with these kind of movies through, like nowadays, through what is 3000
a riff track or something?
Yeah,
I think we
Mr.
know
Science Theater.
Yeah, Mr. Science Theater, riff track, any kind of Mystery Science Theater type show. Or,
yeah.
Maybe cultural, Family Guy or whatever is the latest thing that uses those cultural references.
And Mystery Science Theater made fun of them, but I think it also respects them in their own way. And I certainly, after watching some of that, I actually got a lot of interest built up for 1950s horror movies because there's something special about them. There's something special about watching a
Dude, I'm
production.
looking at the poster from 1950. It is really well done, like artistic, like the composition and everything. So there's some back to roots. If anybody wants to see it on the IMDb, they have the posters of it. It's really good.
Yeah, there's this movie is not a cheap out movie. A Thing from Another World. And we'll get into that in a second, but I developed a large respect for these kinds of movies, and I really appreciate that back then they didn't have the special effects to kind of carry it through a large chunk of the movie as we would see nowadays, where you horror movies, especially horror science fiction, has turned, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, has turned to almost an action series. I don't know if you noticed that, but
That's a great point of view. That's a great point. Aliens to Aliens. You know, I know you really like Alien, and then Aliens kind of turned that into more of an action movie. Yes, these days I feel the special effects is more of a crutch than anything.
absolutely. And it's like, well, we could put some really good plot building in here, or we could put a cool chase scene with an alien. And they're like, let's do the chase scene.
They didn't have the special effects to have the crutch, so they had to have like character development and story, things that we really have got away from.
Yeah. And so to kind of tie that into the thing from another world, I actually just watched it last night, so it's pretty fresh in my head. And I kind of got the impression, and this is common throughout a lot of films at the time, it's kind of structured more like a play, which is interesting. It's like...
Let's elaborate that. So there's not... Okay, so a lot of the big movies nowadays are like...
Bam, 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 bam.
Yeah, like Big Sky Beam, Marvel, and looking at you, Marvel movies.
Yeah.
First act, second act, weak third act, the usual. So elaborate, like, what do you mean when you say it?
So you don't get a lot of camera shots. You get longer camera. You get longer scenes. Longer sets of groups of maybe 4 kind of having a conversation about what's going on, about, this thing, the exposition. Then it's them in the plane talking to each other about flying over there. Why are we here? Yada, yada, yada. Let's make some jokes.
Oh, it kind of sounds like a lot of organic, like them talking.
Did I lose you?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. So just come back to me.
Yeah, so you get that, and then you get them getting to the facility, and then they're talking. They find the saucer, which there's actually a scene where they find the saucer, and they're like looking around it, that they take and kind of pay homage to in the thing, which is kind of cool. Like where you'll stay. If you ever see the movie, they're standing around a circle of the spacecraft.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, because it is. I wouldn't say it's a shot by shot, a shot for shot, but
yeah, it's you can tell. Which was really neat. But so yeah, you get that. Whereas like The Thing, 1982, and later on, they're more fast paced, 1-to-1 kind of character interaction. What are you doing? Yada yada. Okay, next scene. Yeah, move. Next scene. Whereas this one really takes its time because it really doesn't have anything else to do. So you don't get as much action. You get a couple scenes with the alien, and then you're out. And this one definitely doesn't explore the same complexity of an alien that the novella does. It's really just like an alien it's weird. They reference to it as a vegetable, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, that's and there's some pseudoscience in there and everything too, that they compare it to different plants, like these plants that have some kind of intelligence to them.
Mm-hmm.
But the writer originally didn't know that those plants really don't exist and everything. But it does have the ability to like duplicate itself. It's basically it feeds off blood, doesn't it? It's like a vampire. It's a vampire plant, basically. I mean, it's a simplified term, but yeah, it's basically a vampire plant.
I was also really impressed by the intelligence of the movie. The movie did ask some questions that like movies nowadays don't even tackle. Probably again because they're in a rush to get through the plot, but. Like they said, be careful with the alien. It might have a disease on it that we don't have any remedies for. I was like, wow. You never hear that from movies now.
That's actually pretty realistic and intelligent speak. I mean, that's their what's War of the Worlds. That's how we defeated the aliens. That's the whole.
Yeah, they were thinking about that stuff back then. Nowadays, it's more like the alien flies down here and we punch it a lot of times.
I got Independence Day. What
Yeah.
on earth? All right.
I guess we won with the virus on that movie.
Gee,
Wah,
well,
wah.
and that was even modern. That was even modernized because it was a digital virus. So my
Yeah.
goodness.
Oh, it's embarrassing.
I was just watching something with Jeff Goldblum on Disney Plus about that too. But
Talk about aging well. Oof.
yeah, like a fine one.
Yeah. But the movie in that movie, of course, we should talk about the fire scene. That's probably the most interesting scene. Is they take on the alien and they decide to set it on fire because bullets ain't working.
And they throw kerosene on him, and that's the first time in film that there's a full body. It's a technical term, but I'm just gonna do layman. A full body burn, I think, is the layman's term for it, and you can really see the reaction in the actor's face. There's a lady with like a blanket there's like real real harm and physical threat that could happen. I mean, I don't know if there's any that if hopefully it went well and everything, but it's a very visceral scene. I mean, they dump several things of kerosene and light him up, and the guy's like, and he's like 6'6".
Tall man.
He's very imposing. But I mean, the whole thing is they can't have special effects, so they can't have this crazy creature that's a amalgamation of all these things, and but it's kind of like the Frankenstein monster of that time. That's kind of their go-to of the 50s and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's like you're saying, it's just their go-to. It's kind of par for the course. You can't really expect like a 50 tentacle detailed creature. You just
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean
got to
they're
put a
working
person in there.
the best they have in limitations, but again, it's a product of the time because that's a monster to them. Is the Frankenstein monsters? They only know what they know of that. They haven't had, you know, Jurassic Park or Aliens yet, or any
Yeah,
of these
yeah.
other pivotal movies that have of their game yet.
Yeah. Well, that fire scene was crazy, and it took me totally by surprise. I was not. I mean, I was just expecting. I don't know. Maybe they light a thing on fire, a piece of paper, and they're like, ah, and then they move it across the screen. No, it was a guy on fire, and he had to like jump out of the building. It was pretty great.
I was jumping for his life to put himself out on the snow, like.
And he sure looked like it. Oh man. But that was really the most intense scene, and then you do get an electrocution scene that doesn't look horrible, but certainly doesn't have the intensity of the fire scene. But it did ask those kinds of questions about like science and how far is too far, and it definitely imposed that. So I can appreciate that from a 1950s horror movie.
Yeah, and I think that's a product of the time too. A lot of the military would investigate these issues and stuff too. Where you're later on going to get away from that. That's just also a product of the time.
Okay. Well, next up, there's another really, really long pause. There's nothing going on for a while because that was in 1951, right? 1950?
Yes, yeah, I've got it up. Yeah, 1951.
Um, so from there, it's pretty much radio silence from this franchise. I guess we would call it that. Back then, they wouldn't really call it that, would they? Um, Next up, they wanted to make in the mid 1970s a thing. They f- they f- they eventually started filming in 1981, and of course that would be John Carpenter's movie. It's written by Bill Lancaster, and it stars one of my favorite actors, Kurt Russell.
Well, I think Kurt Russell was the go-to kid. Him and Keith David were definitely in a lot of John Carpenter movies, but especially Kurt Russell.
So before we get into the movie itself, let's talk about John Carpenter a little bit. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, just a few movies. Big Trouble in Little China, Halloween, like I said earlier. Uh, uh, They Live. Just a lot of social commentary in his movies too, almost like Romero and the his zombie movies.
What's your favorite movie from John Carpenter?
This one,
This is it.
yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
is
is
it.
this is probably
This
mine too.
is. Uh, I mean, They Live is also good. I mean, that's what comes in the disc set I have is They Live also. Um, man, but I think this is like I want to say his magnus opus because it's like the ending of it, but I think this is his pinnacle of his career. Just all these actors coming together. Um, who they got the special effects that they got I mean, there's a lot of preparation with this movie. They lived together in to get these performances. They lived together weeks before actual filming.
Yeah, they did have good like a live-in chemistry to each other.
Yeah, a lot of times what you'll have, like Saving Private Ryan, and is a good. This is an example. Everybody went to boot camp, but Ryan, the Private Ryan, which is played by Matt Damon. So they had this feel of connectedness, and he had this like isolation of not being in the group, and they're kind of mad at mad about getting them, but all of them have like a boot camp or a bonding moment before the film, and that usually translates to the film quite a bit. Like there's an old saying of like if it's an easy shoot, it's like a bad movie, but if it's a hard shoot, it's a good movie because that all goes through the camera. You know, if they're wet and cold, you can see the suffering that they've done for their art. You know.
All right, some big movies he did before this were Dark Star and Assault on Precinct 13. Have you seen any of those?
Yeah, I've seen Precinct 13, and then there's a remake of that also. Dark Star has a lot of history behind that too, but that's almost another episode in itself.
Okay. What did you think of Assault on Precinct 13?
It's a very efficient. It's an efficient story told. Again, Carpenter. Uh, m- thing with his music is not to overpower the scenes. There's some shootouts. It's definitely one of his earlier works because it's not his best ones, but you can definitely see the potential there. It's still better than the remake of it.
Definitely, probably, in my opinion, his biggest movie before this would be Halloween, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Halloween's actually I think gross more, and it's a huge list on everybody's Halloween list of movies, and it spawned a series and everything. It's pretty deal. And again, it's a simplistic movie too. Oh, and then the soundtrack for crying out loud. It's on people's like ringtones, like the keys and all that. Yeah.
Uh, do you think that his success with Halloween was supposed to translate to this movie, just by director alone?
That's a really good question.
Do you think? And neither of us were alive when this came out, right?
Halloween.
When the thing came out,
No, I was.
I was definitely not alive.
I wasn't old enough to watch it yet. That point, yeah.
Oh, you were alive?
This. I don't
82?
give too much away. I was getting pretty close to being bored, so.
Oh, okay. Well, I was not alive. But I'm just curious how they marketed this movie. I haven't seen like trailers or commercials
I don't
for
think
it.
there's a lot of the thing. I don't think there's a lot to go around. I don't know. I'd love to look and see if there's like a Blu-ray 4K with all the special features added to it.
Because nowadays, when you see a commercial, they'll say from the director of this movie, like popular movies, or they'll say from the producers
I don't
of.
think they do. I don't think they pivoted into it or part where you go in from that from one set assess the other.
Hmm.
You're right. That happens a lot. Like the Michael Bay from this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think he rests. I don't think John Carpenter was the kind of guy that would rest on his laurels, like of just like, oh, I made a successful movie. Now I'm gonna
Well,
ride that name.
but it's not
I
always
think
his choice, right?
I think he was still up and comer though. I don't think he.
I don't know, man.
Halloween was a
After you
hit,
do
but
Halloween, I don't know if you're an up and comer. I mean, maybe I guess
no,
you kind of are,
well,
but
a
good.
lot of times you can have a good movie and then a few stinkers, and then not have not be able to recover. So
Well, nowadays, I would assume if something like that, if Halloween being as successful as it was were to come out now and everything and be successful, I guarantee you, regardless of if the director wanted it or not, they'd say from the director of Halloween. I don't know if
oh
they,
yeah, I would double down on that.
I don't know if they do that now or did that then, but I'd be curious. I haven't seen anything from it. Okay, so maybe his name wasn't attached to this, but what about the other big name attached to this? Kurt Russell.
Russell, yeah, I think they probably use that. I mean, I'd really like to see some posters of it and see if like he's forefront, but really there's not. I think they use the classic Thing title
Yeah, I think
where
so
there's
too.
just a figure for that. Because
Mhm.
really the selling point is the thing itself, like this creature, or um really what the creature represents and everything. Because I don't want it to be. There's just so much to go into this, but yeah,
And there was a reason I didn't bring this up, but Kurt Russell was in a John Carpenter movie before this. Actually, a year before this, in 1981. It's a little movie that holds a special place in my heart.
Escape from New York,
Escape from New York. Do you know why it's a special place in my heart?
because you love New York.
Never
New
been.
York.
No, Metal Gear Solid. Are you familiar with that video game?
Yes, I am. I get what you're going.
Solid Snake is based off of Snake Plissken from Escape from New York. So I was very excited to see Escape from New York, and I was a little bit disappointed. It's not as cool as I was hoping it would be, especially knowing about the thing.
Never meet your heroes, so you can't disappoint. Can't disappoint a pitcher. But
It's not a bad movie. I think kind of you phrased it really well in your other description of it. It's efficient.
yes.
It has some set pieces. It has a couple goals in mind. It achieves them, and then it gets out. The goals are not very lofty. And it's not a bad movie, but definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of John Carpenter. It's got some creative stuff in there. But Kurt Russell was a pretty big deal at this time, wasn't he?
I would say so. I mean, lately he's kind of out of the scene. I think he was in like Guardian of the Galaxy 2 and stuff. But yeah, I think this was his error this time.
I mean, look at what we got here. We got in 1962, he's in Dennis the Menace. Did you know that?
Russell?
Yeah, he's on an episode of Dennis the Menace.
Oh, he's on an episode of Dennis the Menace. Well, I know his like big hit was I think the computer that wears tennis shoes. I'm just going off the top of my head and stuff, and I think it's on Disney Plus right now. Just gonna plug that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like he's had such a long career anyway. It's really hard to pull from. I want to rewatch. I want to rewatch Soldier, and that's a lot later on in his career.
The computer wore tennis shoes was 1969. Yep, that was a big one.
It was very It was. I think it was black and white. He was very young in that one.
He was in Super Dad. Not Super Bad. Super Dad.
And not to be confused with it.
And then you got into these movies. Oh, The Fox and the Hound. In 1981, before he did The Thing, he did the Disney's The Fox and the Hound. How about that?
Cartoon?
That's a different
Cartoon, he was a voice actor in that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Some good trivia there.
Adult Copper.
Holy crap. No, that's bringing back some memories.
And then after that, he did The Thing.
Quite a departure.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, quite a transformation. Pun intended. All right, let's start talking about The Thing proper. The Thing released in 1982. Again, the director is John Carpenter. Our star is Kurt Russell, but we got a couple other big names in there. Wilford Brimley, Keith David.
Can I? With he's hardly recognizable because he doesn't have his huge stash in that from the all the commercials and the diabetes stuff that he was in later on. So he is hard to. It's that mustache makes a big difference, like Trebek, you know.
Do you think this is pre-diabetes?
Oh yeah. He looks a lot fitter and healthier in this.
All right, let's talk about some numbers here. The box office, it was budgeted at $15 million, and its opening weekend, it made $3,107,897, and it grossed in the USA $19,629,760, and apparently did not release worldwide because it's the same gross. So
well, it had some stiff competition. Are we gonna get into the timing?
Yeah, why don't you throw that out there?
So this was up against E.T. The phenomenon. E.T. I just watched the video on it. It had multiple awards. E.T. was up against Gandhi for like an Oscar or whatever, and the director of Gandhi was like, "No, E.T. should get it."
Wasn't that the Gandhi thing
ridiculous.
To do?
Yeah, yeah, I guess it was. But I mean, it was just ridiculous. And people, no, actually, it wasn't released exactly. I think it was like 2 weeks apart. But people, E.T. was on people's mind. I mean, E.T. had like shirts and Atari games and products and everything. It was just these are such stark contrast movies. And I think that really hurt. I mean, Carpenter himself he really took this hard when the numbers don't add up, the movie sales, and the critics panned it too because we didn't have we didn't have a lot of critics back in the day. It was Roger Ebert and a few newspapers and stuff like that, you know. So if those critics panned your movie, that was a huge effect.
And I think the critics think it's overrated a little bit or overblown. Roger Ebert wasn't the biggest fan of the movie, but he also didn't really hate it. I believe he gave it a 2.5 out of 4 on his magazine or newspaper thing, whatever, which really isn't a bad score. But he did have some crushing remarks about the thing. Let me see if I can pull that up unless you got it.
I don't have that up right now.
The Thing is a great barf bag movie. All right, but is it any good? I found it disappointing for 2 reasons. The superficial characterizations and the implausible behavior of the scientists on that icy outpost. Characters have never been Carpenter's strong point. He says he likes his movies to create emotions in his audiences. And I guess he'd rather see us jump 6 inches than get involved in the personalities of his characters. This time, though, despite some roughed out typecasting and a few reliable stereotypes, the drunk, the psycho, the hero, he has populated his ice station with people whose primary purpose in life is to get jumped on from behind. The few scenes that develop characterizations are overwhelmed by the scenes in which the men are just setups for an attack by the Thing. Goes on. Well, let's get into the second problem. The second problem, plausibility. We know that the Thing likes to wait until a character is alone and then pounce, digest, and imitate him. By the time you see Doc again, is he still Doc or is he the Thing? Well, the obvious defense against this problem is a watertight buddy system, but time and time again, Carpenter allows his characters to wander off alone and come back with silly grins on their faces until we've lost count of who may have been infected and who hasn't. That takes the fun away. Anyway, it keeps going on, but these are his big complaints of the movie.
Well, easily, Carpenter actually solved the problem. They're all male. It's an all-male cast because if there was a woman, no one would have a minute of peace. She'd always be following. So I mean, the whole point of that, I think he's really picking apart Straw. I mean, I think he's really. I think it's more of just his style. It's not a classic novel or whatever. This is a great piece. There's a lot. This is a very cerebral movie.
Yeah, and I think you might have caught on to something when you're talking about E.T. Um, they're two very, very, obviously, very different movies. E.T. Definitely focused on the characters. This movie isn't about, per se, characters. You know? It's about humanity. It has a lot of that in it. But
It has a
definitely...
larger scope. It has a
Exactly.
larger scope than a suburb, and stakes of a merchandising alien coming to Earth to eat some Reese's Pieces scoops.
Yeah.
Or I think it was the little small ones you can get. They're like M&Ms.
Yeah, Reese's Pieces.
The Reese's Pieces.
I was addicted to those.
Yeah.
Not because of ET, but I was addicted to.
Because they're made by aliens, but anyway.
Yeah, definitely this was not reviewed great when it came out, which, like, to your credit, was we didn't have the internet, we didn't have IMDb, we didn't have Metacritic, we didn't have Rotten Tomatoes. So what do the critics think? Oh, they said it was gross. Okay.
Well, because when at the theater it didn't do well, but it became, I wouldn't even say cult following because it's larger than that when VHS came along.
Yeah.
And now DVD and Blu-ray, because he didn't really get the comeuppance or whatever until later on in Carpenter's career.
Yeah. Of course, if we want to talk about the plot of the thing, and then this is going to be from Wikipedia. In Antarctica, a Norwegian helicopter pursues a sled dog to an American research station. And this is long enough where I think we can kind of piece it apart a little bit. Love the entrance here with a sled dog, and you have no idea why they're trying to shoot it.
Again, he doesn't. Great movies. A good example, Mad Max, Fury Road, or whatever, the newest one. They don't have these huge dumps of beating you over the head with "this is the world, this is how it is." They just do. They just go. They flow. And they let you figure it out, and that's what's going to be the theme of this movie. Is it's open to so many. There's so many videos out there. Please, after this podcast, go watch. Like the ending has been picked apart to death. Which
is, in my opinion, is a pointless endeavor. But I guess for other people, go for it.
That's a great perspective, because you're saying some people are missing the boat, or that's not the whole point of it. But people love this movie that they will go, like the eye line. Oh, if he's a thing, then you can't see his eye line or something. There's just it's a movie that you can watch over and over and over.
Anyway, the Americans witness the Norwegian passenger accidentally blow up the helicopter and himself. The Norwegian pilot fires a rifle and shouts at the Americans, but they cannot understand him, and he is shot dead in self-defense by Station Commander Gary. Love that. The American helicopter pilot R.J. McReady and Dr. Copper leave to investigate the Norwegian base. And we'll get to this in a second. Among the charred ruins and frozen corpses, they find the burned remains of a malformed human, which they recover to the American station. Their biologist, Blair, performs autopsies on the remains and finds a normal set of human organs. So right now they go to that little location, they find the frozen corpses, and then that malformed human. I love that whole thing where they just have that weird creature and then they're kind of just digging through its body. And that's our really first great look into the practical effects.
They still stand up to this time, and it's a great kind of mystery, because they're picking the piece of like what happened here. They just have the results. If you remember, there's a guy operating a radio, and he's got his throat. The blood is like frozen from his veins. There's an axe, and there's the detail of the axe in the wall. I mean, it's just so many things you pick up on multiple viewings.
The set design is outstanding.
Yeah, set design again, great production value for the budget at the time. I mean, just very again, this is Oda Carpenter, efficient craftsman.
I guess this is a good time to bring it up. What's your take on matte paintings and the matte paintings used in this movie?
Matte paintings. Matte paintings have been used in a lot of great movies. Blade Runner.
Oh my god.
Uh,
Are we going to talk
they
about
and
that
they
movie at
held.
some point? I love that movie.
Yeah. Ridley Scott. Yeah. There again. So they've held up for a while. I think they used matte paintings until the 2000s. I would say even.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna quote myself on it. At least the mid '90s and stuff. Matte paintings are great. And then there's some great footage out there. The artist they got to do it is amazing behind the scenes of that, because that one scene is actually there's like this little small piece of snow, and they're actually on like grass, but the matte painting covers it up, and uh, that's what kind of makes it timeless too. And just the skill that they had great painters like that would do that. But a lot of great movies have great matte paintings and miniatures.
Clark kennels the sled dog, and it soon metamorphoses and absorbs the station dogs. This disturbance alerts the team, and Childs uses a flamethrower to incinerate the creature. Blair
There's a lot of
autopsies.
flamethrowers in this movie.
Yeah, if you like flamethrowers, you're gonna love this one.
If you're Elon Musk, the Boring Company fan, you really want to watch this movie.
He
Just want
probably
to get that
funded
plug
it.
up.
Blair autopsies the new creature and learns that it can perfectly imitate other organisms. Recover Norwegian data leads the Americans to a large excavation site containing a partially buried alien spacecraft and a smaller human-sized dig site. Norris estimates that the alien ship has been buried for at least 100,000 years. Blair grows paranoid that the creature could assimilate all life on Earth in a matter of years. The station implements controls to reduce the risk of assimilation. A couple things to pick apart here. Uh, when you watch this movie with somebody, you have to be careful because a lot of people are very sensitive to dog violence.
Hey, can I chime in now?
Mm-hmm.
Recently, my wife has never seen this movie.
Yeah.
And in preparation for this podcast, I watched it with my wife. There was a lot of jumping, a lot of during that. She's a dog lover, and too offended by it, but the effects still are very frightening. And
Dude, I love watching the dogs get like ripped apart. I do not love dogs. In fact, I quite hate them. But I found that it looks so good, especially when it like turns into almost like a flower face.
yeah, actually, the flower face is actually a row of dog tongues. Again, detail, attention to detail. If you go back in freeze frame or slow, it is that. I mean, can't. I'm trying not to interrupt you because it's just there's so many great points to this movie.
No, interrupt away. Yeah. I I I want to also note so far, and this will be pretty much throughout the movie, you don't know what the creature looks like. Like, never once do we actually see like a thing, you know?
There's no there. You don't go into the dictionary and under the thing there's an example of it, and I think
Yeah.
that's the important part of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get
It's what the previous one couldn't do.
It's ironic too because the previous
novel,
one the previous one should have done something more subtle. Maybe instead of put a human out there, but I guess, we talked about that a little bit. It did what it could. But I wanted to talk about a couple other things. Of course, we get the lighting it on fire thing, which is pretty awesome. But I wanted to talk to you also about the way that the movie doles out the scientific exposition. Did you notice? And of course you did, but I found it interesting that they did it through a computer.
Yeah, there's the chess master. I mean, this is the fledgling stage of computers, and I don't know the first scene in the beginning. of him playing the chess master and him. The only actual female voice or female anything to do with the movie is voiced by a female actress playing the chess master, and he gets mad and he dumps the some kind of whiskey or whatever, because everybody drinks when it's cold and you're isolated.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're very very simple. I guess rudimentary computers they have. They have tape reels. I mean, this is.
Yeah. What's your opinion on watching a computer dole out information? I gotta say, I think it's the weakest part of the movie.
You know what? You kind of got me at a loss because I didn't really think of that angle from it.
Yeah, I
don't think of it as a technology movie because it's not going into those like, oh, we're using cell phones, so it's dated, or it's.
No, I wasn't saying it's dated. I just, I think the rest of the movie, we kind of touched on a little bit ago, but the rest of the movie is so subtle and doesn't like specifically go out of its way to tell you everything, except in these few parts where there's a computer and he would go like, what's going on with the thing? And it goes, it assimilates into other things.
Yeah, it's the weakest part, but I think it's because they really kind of, with lack of a better word, I guess painted themselves into a corner, or that's how they delivered. That was what they came up with. A better way of doing it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it'd be hard to find a better way. Although, I mean, they got a freaking group of scientists or science-ish people.
Really don't get into that. That's what's funny about it. You have like the chef that's on rollerblades. You got Kurt Russell's the helicopter pilot, and then you got the aircraft mechanic is Keith Davis. You never see him fix anything, or David.
Yeah, he doesn't do a good job.
Yeah, like.
Can we talk about this crew then, real quick?
It's a motley crew. Let me tell you.
Are these scientists or are these people that are supposed to upkeep a science building for scientists?
It's a good point because you have like a medic, you have a doctor. One of the other guys is the shoots him or whatever. He's basically a cop there. It really doesn't get into that. I assume they were research scientists and they were doing the usual where you dig the ice cores out and you sample that. So
I almost want to think that they're just keeping upkeep people, taking care of the place while
because don't they say
during
something
winter.
about the new crews coming or something, or there's like a changeover or
something like that. And I mean, there's no science going on. Besides, I mean, a doctor cuts it open, but besides him, they got one scientist on this thing, and he's really just a doctor.
He could have been simply just a doctor, a medical doctor, in case somebody sprained their ankle. Or
or got cold. Got a cold.
Yeah, so I mean, you really just got. It's a great point. Even I've seen this movie so many times, I've never really thought about that.
Moving on, there'll be more questions, obviously, but. The dead, and I'll tell you when this one's over, the dead, malformed humanoid creature assimilates in isolated Bennings, but Windows interrupts the process. I love these names. And McReady burns the Bennings thing. Blair sabotages all the vehicles, kills the remaining sled dogs, and destroys the radio to prevent escape. The team imprisons him in a tool shed. Copper suggests a test to compare each member's blood against uncontaminated blood held in storage. But after learning that the blood stores have been destroyed, the men lose faith in Gary, and McReady takes command. And that's the end of this section.
So the blood scene's like a huge scene. It's also another scene that's been picked apart just because of the tension. The amp, like
the test is going to come up in. The test is going to come up in a little bit. Let's save that because I will talk endlessly about that scene.
Okay, great.
I guess my question here, we're starting to get into the rules of the thing, and I wanted to bring that up because I wanted your take. What are the rules of the thing?
Are there really any rules of the thing?
Well, how do you describe what the thing is and what it does?
It's always evolving. It's trying to mimic, I guess you would say, host.
Hmm.
A lot of times it's caught imperfectly creating it.
Yes. So the thing. Okay. So the thing mimics something on touch. You would assume, like
Yeah,
it
it would feel
absorbs it with,
some kind of physical contact.
and it absorbs it, and then becomes a replica of that thing, right?
Yeah,
But
very
it doesn't.
imperfect.
It does. So there is a corpse somewhere, right?
Yeah, usually, or I think it's more of a consumption thing because of the like the dogs. It kind of consumes them and creates.
So it eats. It does consume them. So there is no corpse.
Yes, I'll go with that.
But then, how does it become back to a normal person size eventually? That's where it gets
Um,
squirrely, huh?
yeah, I don't think it's like I think it's
And then some more.
throughout the
Yeah.
throughout the movie. It's a lot of different things.
Um. So there's that, and then there's the question of does there. Here's another deeper question. It takes the memories of that thing that it absorbs and like becomes that, so it has all of its memories. Does it also know it's the thing?
They do hit upon that, and shooting the scene, trying to bring up the blood scene, so you're gonna talk about that. I think they really don't know that they're the thing.
See, to me that
There's
seems
hints
crazy.
toward that.
To me that
I
seems
know, but there's hints toward that, and it's like it's so debatable
yeah.
because of how it's shot. Again, how it's shot, it leaves a. What's so great about the movie? It's a lot of interpretation.
But to me, how could it not know that's the thing? Because at some point it's going to eat the other people. Or does the thing just kind of take over at that point and is like, okay, now I'm going to drive?
I mean, is it a parasite? I mean, well, it's almost.
Yeah, I think the more it's kind of like a time travel movie. Like the more you think about the little intricacies, the more I don't know if it gets bad, but it just gets confusing. Some little pieces.
I totally get that. Yeah, because time travel movies are kind of when you start going down the rabbit hole of that, it really is a difficult subject to cover.
Yeah. McCready, Windows, and Knowles find Fuchs' burnt corpse and surmise he committed suicide to avoid assimilation. Windows returns to base while McCready and Knowles investigate McCready's shack. On their return, Knowles abandons McCready in a snowstorm, believing he has assimilated after finding his torn clothes in the shack. The team debate whether to allow McCready inside, but he breaks in and holds the group at bay with dynamite. During the encounter, Norris appears to suffer a heart attack. End of this quote. That was awesome.
Several sticks of dynamite with the flamethrower. But yeah, because he does that. Let's go back to that. Had they found out that they've killed the dogs? Because the dog handler does not take that very well. The dog handler is very empathetic toward.
Yeah, and that was a good
actually
scene.
he seems more he seems more friendly toward the dogs than the fellow crew members anyway. So.
Yeah, that was a sad scene. It always reminded me of like the Rancor scene in Return of the Jedi.
Oh wow, that's a subtle scene. Yeah, the guy goes over to the Rancor and he starts bawling about it. So.
Like, what a random scene in that movie.
Yeah, that is a yeah.
So finally, these are the bad guys, but he is really sad about his Rancor.
I'm pretty sure he's the one that fed him and like cleaned up after him and had some kind of relationship with him.
Yeah.
He could have like Rancor could have been that. He could have been like a baby Rancor. It was never that. It could have always been that big.
We don't know how big Rancors get.
don't, man.
Maybe that was a baby. I wanted to ask you a question, and we're about to get into that scene. So I wanted to ask these two questions. Um, do you think this movie's smart enough? I think it is. And I think you're going to think it is too. But I wanted to talk about two different concepts and kind of point them in the same direction. Let's start with the Cold War. We're obviously in the middle of the Cold War with Russia at this point, or USSR. It's 1982. And of course, the Cold War kept kind of implying you need to spy on your neighbors and not believe them necessarily. And there's a lot of distrust. And I kind of get a little bit of that in this movie. And I'm wondering if you feel like there's any allegory here.
I mean, that's going to be a common theme among movies done at this time in the 80s is the Cold War. Rocky, to name another one, which is very on the nose. It's clearly it's the message, but yeah, that's just I mean, that's a whole, again, that's another podcast of the Cold War. They just really run that into the ground in society from that, and who's to say there's not a modern day version of that? But I think it is. It's a very cerebral movie, and I think does allegory into that, and the paranoia that the thing is just a tool to incite the paranoia and isolation that we feel. I mean, you can even look at it from a humankind standpoint of how we isolate ourselves through like social media now.
Wow. Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's timeless in that way because it's a human story. It's human extreme situations of isolation, the threat of death, not trusting anyone.
Well, to go into the same boat and to use a phrase you just used, on the nose, especially with the scene we're about to talk about. The other thing that kind of plays into that is AIDS was happening at the time.
Oh, thank you. I totally missed that, and I they have made a lot of comparisons to that.
Oh, so now, yeah.
Also, I'll give you this too. That actually reminds me of also. There's even allegories of aging, where your body actually turns against itself. You know, as we age, our bodies break down, and over time. I think that's a little bit more, I'm going to say outlandish, but a little bit more of a stretch.
Mm-hmm. I didn't think about the AIDS thing, by the way. I read that was one of the trivia points.
It's a commonality. I was deep diving in some other things.
Test the blood thing really hits hard when you think about it now.
Yeah, now it's really on the nose.
All right. As Copper attempts to defibrillate Norris, his chest transforms into a large mouth and bites off Copper's arms, killing him. McCready,
I want to cover that scene. You cover the actual blood. I want to cover the where he's using the actual defib unit.
Okay, can you go ahead? Let's talk about this. I love this scene.
That scene, so many things had to come together. There's a real life amputee that was involved in that scene. He had a industrial accident. And that's what works with that. And that's an actual hydraulic device that grabs those arms. And he has actually a mask. If you go back, he actually has a mask of the actor on. And the amputee has the the gel filled arms and everything. And I think they used wax for the bones. That's how they got around not having CG, is creativity.
God, it looks amazing.
It does, and there was probably some risk in that. A hydraulic, having hydraulics is there's some danger with that. Machinery uses that, industry, aircraft, tractors, all that. So, and them finding somebody in where they were at, in like Norwegian or whatever, like that had that actual accident up to I think it was up to the almost to his elbows. For that. So yeah, if you don't see that scene coming for the first time, it's amazing.
Oh
It's
my
still, you know what?
god.
It's still amazing now.
It's
Even
I think because you don't think about it that way, where you could like push it through their body. So that just comes way out of left field. That seems awesome.
I mean, yeah, just using the amputee and then the wax and everything, and then it's again just such creative solutions, turning limitations into strengths in a way.
McCready incinerates the Norris thing, but its head detaches and attempts to escape before
Again,
also being burned.
another scene, and it's been parodied. It's been like culturally done.
It was in It too.
It's yeah. Oh my god, yeah. It was a very heavily inspired or like I don't know. I'm pretty sure or homage to it. Yeah.
That detaching, and that's one of the famous lines in it, right? It's like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Great delivery too, by the way. Dude, there was noxious chemicals in there's like a really good interview of like, yeah, there's noxious carcinogenic like, chemicals that were going on with because when the neck separates, there's this oozing pus and everything, and the fire and everything. Well, there was people underneath operating that, and they're inhaling. Because I mean, they're using a real flamethrower and fire. They're burning that whole set down, and like,
and that's the set that they used. Released. That's the set that they used in the beginning, right? For the where they're looking at the old, what do you call it? The old site that got destroyed. Didn't they use the burnt down set from this one?
I'm not sure about that.
I believe they did, which is so poetic. Because that would be like the continuation, almost like a cycle, implying a cycle. It's mind blowing.
I mean, there's just so much. There's just so much to this movie.
Yeah. All right. McCready is forced to kill Clark in self-defense when the latter lunges at him from behind with a knife. He hypothesizes that the Norris thing's head demonstrated that every part of the thing is an individual life form with its own survival instinct. He's the pilot. He sequentially tests blood samples with a heated piece of wire. Everyone passes the test except Palmer, whose blood jumps from the heat. Palmer transforms and infects windows, forcing McCready to burn them both. Holy shit. This scene is so good. Is there a tenser scene ever?
It's really shot to really amp up the intensity. I was suffering for the art, man. I was getting in there.
All right. So yeah, we're talking about the blood thing.
I guess like yeah, click the little clicker. We're talking about the blood scene that you were gonna elaborate on.
Okay. Yeah, that was just like a really, really intense scene with a really, really great payoff. You never see that nowadays. You never just see it's like really quiet. Like everyone kind of standing around watching this test go about. You never know who's going to get it. And then it happens and they're on a bench. And the thing is right there.
They're tied to the bench, aren't they?
Yeah.
They tie more people when they.
Oh my god! Look, it is very intense and scary, and it's also really, really funny. I gotta admit, I laughed the whole way through it, but in a good way. Not in a way like this is stupid. In a way like this is awesome.
Well, there's also a misdirect in it too.
Yes.
And how it's shot, and then you're shooting the blood, like him testing it, and then you're going to the actor's face and the sigh of relief of that's why I went, and it makes you think, do they not know that they're the thing? Because it's the interpretation of like, oh, I guess I'm not the thing, but do I not know that I'm the thing? Like it's
yeah, because they don't really know, like they have no idea.
I mean, why would they have that much relief from that?
Yeah.
You're the thing.
They must not. Well, it's clearly, yeah, they don't. Maybe they're like, am I or am I not? And they don't really know. That might be another AIDS thing.
Ow! Wow. There you go.
Childs is left on guard while the others go to test Blair. They find that Blair has escaped and has been using vehicle components to assemble a small spacecraft. That is kind of silly. On their return, Childs is missing.
That's probably one of the sillier points. Again, as I hate to pick apart a great movie, but like that's besides the computer delivering some of that information, is that he's able to build from like a helicopter.
Yeah, that's pretty silly, but I give him the benefit of the doubt.
He's just trying to imply that he's trying to escape, basically, and that's what the tool they use to.
On their return, Childs is missing, and the power generator is destroyed. MacReady speculates that the thing intends to return to hibernation until a rescue team arrives. MacReady, Gary, and Knowles decide to detonate the entire station to destroy the thing. As they set explosives, Blair kills Gary, and Knowles disappears. Blair transforms into an enormous creature and destroys the detonator. MacReady triggers the explosives using a stick of dynamite, destroying the base. We'll get to the next part in a second. This is maybe the weaker part of the movie. I don't know. As far as this movie goes, it builds up, and you can't not do this scene.
It's
but
the third act. I mean, that's typical movie. Like you're saying, the original, the 1951, that was based on the novelization. So third act's really tough to seal the deal, right?
Yeah.
You got, because really the meat and potatoes of it is that scene, the blood scene. Let's say that's like the
climax, really.
Yeah, that's really the climax. So it's hard to end when you have all the suspense, because the suspense has to go. The suspense has to end, right? Jaws, you have to see the shark eventually.
Yeah.
Or there's no.
People will be like, "What the hell? We didn't see a thing."
There has to be some payoff for it, but you can use it sparingly, but you have to seal the deal. In a lot of movies,
yeah. I do like that it was quick. I think John Carpenter thought the way we thought. Like, I have to do this, so let's do it. And
I have to take your medicine, so just.
Yeah, I'm glad that it was very quick. And it wasn't bad. It just wasn't. It wasn't the rest of the movie. But this is the good stuff. MacReady sits nearby as the station burns. Child returns, saying he became lost in the storm when pursuing Blair. Exhausted and slowly freezing to death, they acknowledge the futility of their distrust and share a bottle of scotch. The end.
There's some great videos that pick apart that scene. So here's one theory: is they're using those bottles that Kurt Russell's character has as cocktail, the like gasoline, fuel, whatever fuel they have.
Yeah. And
as a test, he fakes like drinking it, and then he hands him the bottle. And if he was the thing, he wouldn't have a reaction, right? Because he wouldn't know it's gasoline or whiskey. He wouldn't know the difference.
I don't know about that, wouldn't he? Because they're supposed to have all their memories.
It might not have the taste buds or whatever. But anyway, that's one of the theories.
Right.
And then how the lighting is, Kurt Russell's just huffing and puffing away. You see him breathing.
Oh, okay.
Start comparison, you see, but really you do see the other guy breathing. David breathing. But it's because like Kurt Russell was like running around flamethrowing things, and he was lost in there too. But there again, there's like, it's been picked apart. There's a lot of like, Carpenter knew what he was doing. He wanted to leave it up to people's imagination, and that's really what good films do, and books. Any kind of good entertaining media is you leave it up. Don't treat the audience like they're dumb. Let them figure it out.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's a step lower than let them figure it out. I think there is no answer.
Fill in the place, or let them fill in the spots. What they think.
I just think there is no answer. And if that breaks your brain, then yeah, fill in an answer, I guess, but there is no answer. Like, that's it. Like, the whole point of the movie is distrust with people. Now you're left with these two guys who are going to die anyway, so it doesn't matter.
It's futility, right? It's
Right. So at this point, trust does not matter, and that's the end. Like, you could say, well, one of them has to be, or one of them doesn't have to be, or whatever, maybe. But to me, that is the ending, is you don't know. And I think that's great.
it's a and into a great movie.
Whew. They made a prequel to this movie. It's called The Thing. They made it in 2011. Oh, thank you for making this movie.
We've both seen this movie.
Yeah. It stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Joel Edgerton, Ulrich Thompson. Look, there's worse movies, all right? This movie is a prequel and a remake at the same time. You don't need a prequel. The thing actually kind of tells the story better than this movie does, the 1982 version. And it barely talks about it, but it kind of just shows you images of what happened, and that's good enough. I don't know. What do you think of The Thing 2011?
But you're saying that it is a prequel, but they also try to do some shot by shots. So, I had mentioned the axe before, and then the operator that cut his throat and everything. Those things are laid in. This actual set was there was no blueprints or anything from the 1982 version. So they went on a fan site that had it broke down the original square footage detail to it, and they used the height of Kurt Russell to reproduce outpost that was there. Just a little trivia fact for you.
That's
there
pretty
are people
cool.
People love this movie so much. There was a fan site that had that.
Jeez. I guess I don't love it that much.
I mean, also there's a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands.
Yeah.
So
clearly, yes.
Or different types. Maybe they were an architect or something, so it was pretty easy. But so this man, it's hard to it's. Can you help me out? Because it's hard to figure out where to start with this.
Well,
prequel.
I think if we don't need to outline it the way we did the other one, but we just need to talk about a couple things here. Obviously, this is a movie in 2011. They have a difference of way of making movies. They have the CGI budget to produce. And let's talk about some of that stuff real quick. The box office. The budget was $38 million, and its opening weekend made $8.5 million. USA gross was $17 million. Worldwide gross was only 27.5, so it actually lost money. That's unfortunate. I guess in a way it's not, because the other part of it is that, again, they have a CGI budget, so they use it. It from a spirituality perspective, it really is betraying The Thing in that way. I think people really, really enjoy the fact that it's a lot of practical effects in The Thing 1982. And we didn't really get a lot of that in this movie. And we actually got a lot more action scenes, which we don't need.
It actually, hitting upon that, it actually is more of a slasher film. The tone is almost totally different. It was supposed to be practical. There's some footage and behind the scenes, there's some frustrated crew members. They made practical effects for this movie, and they look good, but it was the studio's meddling, the usual upper management executives, the non-creatives that interfered and replaced the practical with CG and used practical as placeholders. This could have been, it had potential to be close to how good the 1982 John Carpenter's thing is, but in the studio, we hear it again. We hear it a lot. Studio meddling, run that aspect of the movie.
It has a 49 for Metacritic. So there you go. I would argue it's not that bad. There's some good stuff here. It's not boring. It certainly goes at a click.
It's definitely action oriented.
Yeah, it's more action oriented, and that's probably to its positive, because it isn't going to be the thing. So you might as well get something else out of it. You don't need it, and I would hope that most people just say it didn't happen if they're actually talking about the thing, and just stick with 1982's version, and that's kind of it.
A product of his time. There's 2 female actresses in it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a female lead.
Strong female lead. Kicks a lot of ass.
It's an unearned. It feels like an unearned female lead. It's not that Ripley where she earns it throughout, and you have all this time and character development through it. It just.
Yeah, she's just a scientist, if I remember correctly.
She's just a subject. She's an SME. She's a subject matter expert that they come along. She's recruited into. So unlike, you kind of know where they're coming from. Unlike the 1982, she's coming in there for her expertise. She's not she's not at the gym working out.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to do that, but she's definitely.
It's weird when she's flipping around and doing jumps and. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to look up what the actress is like, what she's really and known for.
Scott Pilgrim.
Gaming for you. She's in Deus Ex Mankind Divided. She does some voice work on that.
Oh, I didn't know that. Very cool.
In 2006, 5 years later after this film. She does a lot with the Deus Ex stuff and some Assassin's Creed. So
yeah.
But
well, that pretty much closes. Oh, go ahead.
Again, it's really hard to replace Kurt Russell.
Especially with a woman.
Exactly. No, it's. I mean, I think it's the relationship with him and John Carpenter, and Kurt Russell was on the rise, and I think the role was really written for him, and I think it was actually,
Yep.
For that, so.
Well, that pretty much wraps up our discussion on The Thing. Anything you'd like to add, Ninja?
It was great being back to the podcast. Like to hear some feedback from the audience. Like you said before, looking for.
Yeah, next time we have a couple other movie ideas in the works. We're kicking them around. We'll see what happens if we get some recommendations. He wants to do Die Hard. I want to do The Fly, but we'll do other stuff as well. Like potentially Blade Runner. Now that you brought it up, I want to do that.
Let's bring up those matte paintings. Let's do the top 10 matte painting movies. If Mojo, what is it? Mojo.com or what? Yeah, it hasn't done it yet.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they have.
It's kind of their bread and butter.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Ninja.
Oh, thanks for having me, Spence.
All right. Bye, everybody.